Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Emma stood by the window of her small but cozy apartment in Springdale, clutching a steaming mug of chamomile tea as the autumn wind danced through the amber leaves outside. Her life was quiet, ordered, and predictable the way she liked it. She taught second grade at the local elementary school, volunteered on weekends at the library, and on Sunday mornings, she attended the same white-steepled church she'd grown up in. There was comfort in the familiar. But that morning, her phone had buzzed with a message that shattered her calm routine. "I need to see you tonight. Dinner at my place? It's important. Liam." Liam Harper. Just reading his name made her heart tighten, a strange mix of nostalgia and uncertainty. He wasn't just any man. He was her best friend since childhood, and now one of the wealthiest tech moguls in America. They had grown up together on the same block, raced bikes down the hills of Springdale, and shared peanut butter sandwiches on the old swing set behind the school. Liam had always been bold and brilliant, even as a boy, but when his parents died in a plane crash when they were 17, something in him changed. Emma had been his anchor during that storm, his only stability, and even when he left for college in California, even when success took him to New York City and beyond, their connection never faded. Still, he rarely called out of the blue like this. That evening, dressed in a soft blue sweater and jeans, Emma arrived at his penthouse in Manhattan, an opulent space made of glass and stone, perched high above the noise of the city. The contrast between their worlds was always jarring. But tonight, there was something else. A current. An anticipation she couldn't quite explain. Liam greeted her at the door in a black sweater and slacks, barefoot, his sleeves pushed up casually, like he wasn't one of the most powerful men in tech. His smile was warm, but his eyes, there was a seriousness behind them. Dinner was quiet at first. Gourmet pasta, candlelight, soft jazz humming in the background. They spoke about the usual Thinkshare students, his latest software venture, mutual friends from back home, but the moment dessert was served, Liam leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, his voice dropping to a low, earnest tone. "I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound insane," he said. Emma's heart skipped. "Okay. I want a child," he said. "I've wanted one for a while now, and I've realized I don't want to wait anymore." She blinked, confused. "You mean adoption?" "No," he said quietly. "I want to have a baby. My own. But with someone I trust. Someone kind, honest, someone I can count on." Her breath caught in her throat as the implications unfolded in her mind. "Liam, I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. "This isn't about romance or pressure. You know me better than anyone. I've tried dating. It always ends the same. They want the spotlight, the money, not me." He stood and began pacing, hands running through his hair. "You're the only person who's never wanted anything from me. You've always just seen me." Emma couldn't speak. Her fingers trembled around her fork. "I know this is huge," he continued, his voice softer now. "But I can take care of everything, all the medical stuff, the support, the costs. I'll be there every step of the way. And if you say no, we'll forget this happened. I won't let it ruin us, I promise." She stared at him, barely breathing. "You're asking me to have your child," he nodded. "Yes." Her mind spun. 1,000 memories surged. His hand in hers after his parents' funeral, their first snowball fight, the letter he sent her during his first lonely semester at Stanford. There was so much history between them, so much trust, and yet this was something else entirely. "I'm still a virgin," she whispered before she could stop herself. Liam froze. "I know," he said, voice reverent. "I've always known, and that's why I'm asking you, because you value things that matter. You value life." The room went still. Only the distant hum of the city reminded her that the world outside still moved. Emma stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glowing skyline. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned everything else. She wasn't sure what stunned her more, that he asked, or that some part of her wasn't offended or scared, but deeply moved. A child, it was something she dreamed of, not in the abstract, but in quiet, specific ways. Tiny feet on hardwood floors, lullabies in the dark, love so tangible it wrapped around her ribs. But not like this. Or maybe exactly like this. She turned back to him, her voice fragile. "You really thought about this?" He nodded. "For months. And you thought of me?" "I couldn't think of anyone else." She sat back down, folding her hands to stop their shaking. "I need time." "Of course," he said instantly, coming around to kneel beside her chair. "Take all the time you need. Just think about it." She looked into his eyes, those same eyes she had trusted since she was 10. There was no trace of manipulation, only hope. And for the first time in years, Emma felt the ground shift beneath her carefully laid plans. A new path emerging, foggy and uncertain, but strangely luminous. As the clock ticked into the night and Liam gently walked her to the door, neither of them knew it yet, but something irrevocable had already changed. A seed had been planted, and it was growing faster than either of them could see. The first time Emma met Liam Harper, he was 10 years old, sitting alone on the cracked wooden bench behind the elementary school. His uniform was too stiff, his backpack too new, and his eyes too empty for a boy his age. She had been watching him from a distance for days, noticing how he kept to himself during recess, never joined the other boys in their chaotic games, and never smiled, not even when the teacher praised him for his perfect math score. There was something in him that felt displaced, like he didn't quite belong to this small town or the noisy world around him. So, on that windy Tuesday afternoon, while the others ran after a soccer ball in the dust, Emma walked up to him with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich wrapped in a paper towel. "You look hungry," she said simply. Liam blinked at her, caught off guard. "I'm not." "I didn't ask," she replied, sitting down beside him and placing the sandwich between them. "But if you change your mind." He didn't answer, but 5 minutes later, after she started humming a tune from a cartoon she liked, he quietly picked up the sandwich and took a bite. That was the beginning. Their friendship grew like roots underground, quiet, steady, and invisible to most. While Liam's parents worked long hours or traveled for business, Emma's home became his second haven. Her mother made extra portions at dinner without asking, and her father taught Liam how to throw a baseball. They'd spend summers catching fireflies, building forts, and whispering secrets under the stars. But when Liam turned 12, everything shifted. His father's company was acquired, and suddenly, the Harpers became one of the wealthiest families in the state. He was pulled out of public school and sent to an elite private academy hours away, the kind where students wore blazers and learned Latin. Everyone assumed that would be the end of their bond. It wasn't. He still called her every Sunday night. He still wrote letters when he felt lost. He still showed up unannounced during long weekends, sitting in her kitchen with the same hunger in his eyes, only now for something deeper than food. When he turned 17, tragedy struck. A private jet, engine failure, both parents gone. Emma found out during a school assembly when someone passed her a note with just 3 words, "Turn on television." She did, and then she ran all the way across town to the hospital where Liam sat in silence, his face pale, clothes wrinkled, staring at the floor like a boy who had just been erased. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around him. They didn't speak for hours. From that day on, they were no longer just childhood friends. They became each other's lifeline through his loneliness at Stanford, through her struggles with scholarship applications, through every holiday he spent at her house instead of in his own. They held each other up. Emma was the calm in his chaos, and Liam was the fire that kept her from becoming too careful, too afraid. When she chose to stay in Springdale and teach, he supported her. When he built his first tech company, she was the first person he called to celebrate, even before the investors. Their lives moved in opposite directions, in fast lanes and city lights, hers in chalkboards and quiet nights, but their connection remained a constant hum beneath it all. Even their friends questioned it. "You sure nothing's going on between you two?" they'd ask. She would smile and say, "He's just Liam." But what she never said aloud, what she barely admitted to herself, was that sometimes she did wonder, not because he ever crossed a line, not because he ever treated her as anything but sacred, but because there were moments, unspoken moments, The way he looked at her when she laughed. The way he remembered the smallest details, like her favorite book or how she hated coffee unless it had cinnamon. The way his voice softened when he said her name. Still, life had kept them where they were. Two best friends walking parallel paths, no confessions, no expectations. Until now. Until that night in the penthouse when Liam looked her in the eye and asked for something she never thought he'd ask, a child with her. It was impossible to pretend everything was the same after that. The air between them felt different now, charged, fragile, and impossibly tender. She thought back to the 10-year-old boy on the bench, to the teenager broken by grief, to the man who now stood as one of the most powerful names in the country, and who still only turned to one person when he needed something real. Her. What did that mean? What did it say about them? The next morning, Emma stood in her classroom, watching her students color in silence, their little hands steady and innocent. She blinked back unexpected tears. Was it possible that a friendship so deep, so true, had always been meant to become something more? Or was she just seeing what she wanted to see now that everything had changed? Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, whispering possibilities. Emma hadn't been sleeping well. The nights in Springdale had turned colder, and yet it wasn't the chill that kept her awake. It was the echo of Liam's voice, that request, that impossible, irreversible offer. I want a child with you. The words played on a loop, even in the silence. She sat on the porch swing of her childhood home, wrapped in a thick gray blanket, watching the early morning mist rise over the front lawn. Her mother used to sit right here, knitting in the evenings, sipping sweet tea. Now the house was hers, left to her after her parents retired to Florida, but the stillness of the place felt heavier these days. Liam had always been part of her internal rhythm, a thread quietly woven through each stage of her life. But now, that thread was tugging at something deeper. Something she hadn't dared to acknowledge until now. She wanted a child too. That truth hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't just a reaction to his proposal, it had lived inside her for years. She'd felt it every time she saw one of her students hug their mother at pickup time, every time she held a child's hand through tears or saw a drawing with stick figures labeled Mommy and Me. She longed to be a mother, fiercely. But not like this, right? Except when she tried to picture what this was, she couldn't find anything wrong with it. Liam wasn't a stranger. He wasn't asking for something careless or transactional. He was asking her, of all people, because he trusted her heart more than anyone else's. She still remembered the first time he mentioned wanting kids. It had been 4 years ago, during a rare winter visit, when they were walking through the woods behind her house. Snowflakes clung to the ends of his lashes, and he looked up at the sky and said, almost wistfully, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever have something real, like a family." At the time, she had laughed gently, brushing snow off his coat. "You could have anything you want, Liam. Not the real stuff," he replied. "That can't be bought." Now, here they were, facing the possibility of creating that real stuff together. She confided in her mentor, Mrs. Evelyn, the woman who had once taught Emma in 3rd grade and later became a guiding presence in her life. They sat together on a wooden bench near the town square, surrounded by rustling trees and chirping birds. Mrs. Evelyn, now retired and silver-haired, listened quietly as Emma poured her heart out. "I'm scared," Emma admitted. "What if this ruins everything between us?" Mrs. Evelyn reached for her hand, her touch warm and steady. "Love has many forms, darling. Some start with romance. Some start with trust. What you two have, it's rare. If you both walk into this with open hearts, it might not ruin anything. It might reveal something beautiful." Those words stayed with her. A week after Liam's proposal, she found herself standing at the edge of his penthouse terrace again, the city pulsing beneath them like a living organism. The air smelled faintly of rain and cedar, and her palms were clammy with nerves. Liam walked toward her, barefoot, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I didn't want to rush you," he said gently, offering her the cup. She took it, her eyes meeting his. "I've been thinking," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "about everything. About us." He nodded. Silent. "I want to do it," she said finally, "but we do it together, as friends, as equals. This has to come from a place of honesty, not obligation. A breath escaped his chest relief, gratitude, maybe even awe. Together, he echoed, stepping closer. Always. They decided to move forward with artificial insemination, both agreeing it was the best way to keep the process respectful and intentional. No blurred lines, no pressure. Liam insisted on handling all expenses. Appointments were scheduled, doctors consulted, procedures explained. He was there for every step, riding with her to the clinic, holding her hand through consultations, ordering her favorite Thai food after a long day. His presence was grounding, constant, but never invasive. In return, Emma let him into her world more than ever before. She showed him the scrapbook she kept, photos of her students, handwritten notes from grateful parents, her own childhood diary filled with dreams and doodles. "I always thought I'd fall in love first," she told him one night as they sat on his couch, the city skyline blinking behind them. Liam looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Maybe you still will." She smiled, brushing off the weight of his words. And yet, in the quiet moments, something deeper stirred an intimacy that had nothing to do with physical touch and everything to do with presence, with trust, with soul-level knowing. At the clinic, the nurse greeted them as Mr. and Mrs. Harper by mistake. Emma flushed with embarrassment. But Liam only smiled and said softly, "That's got a nice ring to it." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth behind his eyes that lingered with her. In the waiting room, he rubbed gentle circles on the back of her hand. When she emerged from the procedure, still drowsy from the medication, he wrapped her in his jacket and carried her to the car like she weighed nothing. That night, as she lay curled on the guest bed in his apartment, she felt an ache she couldn't numb. No fear, not doubt, but something new, something beginning. And even though they had made a careful plan, drawn the boundaries clearly, there was a softness now in every glance, every silence, every shared laugh. This wasn't just a decision. It was the start of something no contract could define. The rain started gently that afternoon, brushing against the windows of Emma's classroom as if the sky itself were whispering secrets. Her students had just left for the weekend, and she sat alone at her desk, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug, now cold. The clock ticked louder in the quiet, and her thoughts swirled louder still. 1 week had passed since she'd told Liam yes, since she agreed to try, but reality had its own weight, signing the medical forms, scheduling the first appointment, watching Liam's expression shift from hope to hesitation, and back again. Every detail made it more real. She knew she hadn't rushed the decision. She had taken time days filled with journaling, prayer, walks through the cemetery where her grandparents rested. She needed to feel their presence somehow. She needed to believe they'd understand this strange but sacred path she was about to walk. And she needed guidance, which is why she found herself once again at Mrs. in Batterley Adonation. Evelyn's door, holding a basket of cinnamon rolls as an excuse for the visit. The older woman welcomed her in with that signature smile, faded but still full of warmth. Her home smelled like pine and old books, a place where time slowed down and clarity often emerged. They sat by the fire, tea in hand, and for a while didn't speak at all. "I'm scared," Emma finally whispered, eyes fixed on the flicker of flame, not just of the process, but of what this might change between me and Liam. "Mrs." Evelyn sipped her tea, nodding slowly. "Change is inevitable, child. But not all change is loss. Sometimes it's revelation." Emma looked up. "You've always believed that love comes in one shape," the older woman continued. "But what if it's bigger than that? What if it starts with trust and grows into something neither of you expected?" Emma's throat tightened. "What if we ruin what we already have?" "Mrs." Evelyn leaned forward, resting her hand over Emma's. "And what if you don't? What if what you already have is the foundation for something more sacred than you've ever known?" There was something about that word sacred that wrapped around Emma's ribs. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a reckless risk. It was something intentional, grounded, honest. That night, Emma returned home and wrote Liam a letter. She didn't text, didn't call. She wrote the way she used to when they were teenagers and he was away at boarding school. When every word came from the quietest part of her heart, she wrote, This isn't a decision I've taken lightly. It's not about obligation or pity or some impulsive moment of nostalgia. It's about believing in you, in us, in the kind of love that isn't flashy or loud, but steady and brave. I'm scared. But I also know this could be something beautiful, not because it's traditional, but because it's true. The next morning, she placed the letter in a cream envelope and drove to the city. Liam wasn't expecting her. He answered the door in a hoodie and socks, eyes widening with surprise. "I wrote something," she said simply, handing him the envelope. He read it in silence while she stood across the room, pretending to be interested in the skyline outside. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I don't deserve this," he said softly. "You do," she replied. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're real, and because you asked me with honesty that takes more courage than most people ever show." Liam took a step toward her, then another, and when he was close enough to reach for her hand, he didn't. Instead, he asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly. "Let's do this together." They returned to the clinic that week. Everything was arranged. The paperwork signed. The medical screenings complete. The procedures planned with precision. Still, despite the science, the process felt strangely spiritual, as if they were stepping into something ancient and primal, two souls choosing to create life in partnership, not romance, not yet. Liam never missed an appointment. He brought her warm socks when she was cold, read silly magazines in the waiting room just to make her laugh, called her every evening just to check how she was feeling. And even though the boundaries were clear, Emma felt something shifting. She caught herself looking at him longer, lingering in silences, wondering quietly if this journey would change not just her life, but her heart. Then came the procedure. Artificial insemination, clinical, straightforward, and strangely surreal. She lay on the exam table, sterile lights above her. And yet Liam was the only thing she focused on, his hand in hers. His steady breath. His presence. When it was over, he helped her sit up gently. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her eyes shimmered. "I didn't expect it to feel so intimate." "Me neither," he whispered. That evening, back in Springdale, she curled up under her grandmother's quilt and stared at the ceiling for hours. A dozen what-ifs danced in her mind, but beneath them all was a deeper hum. Something has already changed. The day of the first attempt began with a quiet kind of hope, the kind that doesn't shout or dance, it simply breathes. Emma woke early, the morning still heavy with fog, and dressed carefully in soft, neutral colors. A beige sweater, faded jeans, simple flats, no makeup. She didn't want to turn this moment into a performance. She wanted it to be sacred. Liam picked her up in a black SUV, stepping out to open the door for her like he always did, without fanfare, just instinct. He wore a white button-down and gray slacks, sleeves rolled up, hair still slightly damp. He looked calm, collected, but his fingers tapped against the steering wheel during the entire drive, betraying the tension he carried. At the clinic, everything moved too fast. Nurses in pale uniforms, sterile lights, murmured instructions, consent forms, blood pressure, temperature, waiting. When they finally called her name, Liam rose with her, but she shook her head gently. "I'll be okay," she whispered. "Wait here." He didn't argue, just touched her hand briefly, and that was enough. Inside, she lay still, her eyes focused on the ceiling tiles, as the doctor explained the process again in a calm, practiced voice. The cold instruments, the pressure, the quiet buzz of machinery. She had expected it to feel more profound, but it felt strangely mechanical. When it was over, the nurse helped her sit up. "You did great," she said kindly. But Emma didn't feel great. She felt uncertain, as if something had slipped from her grasp before she could hold it. Liam stood as soon as he saw her, his concern etched in every line of his face. "How was it?" "Fine," she said, trying to smile. "Just weird." They drove back in silence, an awkward silence, but a thoughtful one, the kind that carried too many feelings and not enough words. Back at Liam's penthouse, she tried to insist on going home, but the rain had started, hard, relentless sheets of it lashed against the windows, turning the city into a blur of gray and silver. "Just stay," he said. One night, "I'll make tea. We'll watch something stupid." So she stayed. She changed into the oversized t-shirt he offered her, soft, worn, smelling faintly of cedar and mint, and curled up on the massive couch, knees to her chest. Liam brought her a tray, tea with honey, toast with cinnamon sugar, comfort food. They put on a movie neither of them paid attention to. Halfway through, she felt the tears begin to press at the back of her throat. She tried to hide them. Liam noticed anyway. "Hey," he said softly, pausing the film. "Talk to me." "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said, wiping her face. "I know it's early. I know we have to wait, but I feel like I should feel something different already, and I don't. I just feel empty." He leaned toward her, his voice low. "You're not empty. You're one of the most full-hearted people I know." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "What if it doesn't work? What if we never get there?" "Then we try again," he said, "and again. I'm in this with you, remember?" She stared at him for a long moment. "Why me, Liam? Why not someone else?" He hesitated, then answered in a whisper, "Because no one else ever made me feel home." The room fell silent again, but this time it was charged, electric. Liam got up and walked to the window, watching the rain pound the glass. "You want to know something?" he said without turning around. "When I was 12, I used to dream about running away, just packing a bag and disappearing. But every time I pictured it, I always imagined one person noticing I was gone. You." She sat up straighter, her heart thudding. "Now I think I've always known," he continued, "that if there was one person in the world I could build something real with, it would be you." Emma rose from the couch and stepped toward him slowly, carefully, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. When she reached him, she didn't say a word. She just stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, watching the storm. He didn't touch her, didn't reach for her hand, but his presence next to hers felt like gravity, like something pulling her inward. Later that night, as the storm softened and the lights of the city flickered like candles, Liam brought out an old photo album, one she had forgotten existed, pictures from childhood, the two of them on bicycles, Halloween costumes, a blurry shot of them laughing in a field, tangled in leaves. "I kept this," he said, "because some days I need to remember where I come from and who I'm doing all this for." She flipped a page, and there it was. A note she'd written him at 13, folded and taped into the book. "You'll always have someone in your corner." The tears came again, softer this time, healing. That night, he made up the guest bed for her, placing a lavender sachet on the pillow, just like her mother used to do. He turned down the lights and stood at the door, watching her settle in. "Good night, Emma," he said gently. "Good night, Liam." But long after the lights were out, neither of them slept, because something had shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the quiet spaces between grief and comfort, between disappointment and faith. Something unspoken had begun to bloom. It was late October when they returned to the clinic. The leaves had turned to fire-burnt orange, crimson, goldened. The air in Manhattan had taken on that crispness that made people breathe a little deeper, walk a little slower. This time, everything felt different. They didn't talk much on the way to the appointment, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, familiar, like a song playing softly in the background. Something known, something trusted. Liam's hand rested on the center console between them, and Emma's pinky brushed against his. He didn't pull away. At the clinic, the nurse greeted them warmly. "Good to see you again, Mr. and Mrs. Harper." Neither of them corrected her. The procedure itself was quicker than the first, almost routine, but something lingered in the air between them. Liam held her hand, thumb brushing hers. His eyes didn't leave her face, not even for a second. Afterward, as they stepped outside, a sudden downpour caught them off guard. Rain hammered the sidewalk, drenching them before they could reach the car. They ran, laughing, slipping, breathless. By the time they reached the parking garage, Emma's hair was plastered to her face, and Liam's white shirt clung to his chest. He looked at her then, laughing through his breath. "You look like a soaked angel." She rolled her eyes, trying to wring water from her sleeves. "And you look like a wet CEO having a very strange day." They drove back to his place. Neither of them suggested anything else. It was natural now, this rhythm between them. At the penthouse, Liam handed her a towel and a hoodie. "You can shower in the guest room." She paused. "Actually, would it be okay if I used yours? The water pressure is better." He hesitated only for a moment. Of course. The hot water was a gift. As the steam wrapped around her, she let herself exhale fully for the first time that day. She thought of the nurse's gentle smile, of Liam's hand in hers, of the way his laugh felt like home. When she emerged, wearing his hoodie and nothing else, she found him in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of red wine. He turned when he saw her, and he froze. It wasn't just the way she looked, the hoodie falling off one shoulder, her damp hair cascading down her back. It was the way she looked at him, as if the walls had finally fallen, as if she wasn't afraid anymore. He handed her the glass, but his fingers lingered on hers a second too long. She took a sip. "This is nice," she said, her voice softer now. "You're nice," he murmured, eyes not leaving hers. The words landed between them like a spark. A moment passed, then another. And then something shifted. Liam stepped closer, slow, hesitant, watching her reaction like a man on sacred ground. Emma didn't move, didn't blink. She just waited. He raised his hand to her face, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were warm, steady. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. She didn't. Instead, she leaned in ever so slightly, and that was enough. The kiss was slow at first, exploratory, but quickly deepened. Years of silence and suppressed feeling breaking open in a breathless moment of truth. His hands cupped her face, hers gripped the front of his hoodie. She was trembling, but not from fear. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I want this." "With you?" Liam lifted her gently, as if she were breakable, and carried her to his bedroom, every step filled with reverencino urgency, no haste, just devotion. That night, they made love for the first time. It wasn't just physical, it was soft, sacred, unhurried, the kind of intimacy that strips away all defenses. Liam was gentle, patient, tuned into every breath she took, every gasp, every pause. And for Emma, whose body had never known this kind of closeness, it was overwhelming in the most beautiful way. She felt safe, seen, cherished. They moved together as if their bodies had always been meant to find one another. Every kiss, every touch felt like a memory they had carried without knowing. And when it was over, when they lay tangled in each other beneath the quiet glow of city lights, Emma pressed her face into his chest and whispered, "Nothing about this feels like a mistake." Liam kissed her forehead. "Because it's not—" They didn't say the word love, not yet, but it lingered there, unspoken, in the way his hand found hers beneath the blanket, in the way her heart beat calmly for the first time in weeks, in the silence that followed, not empty, but full, a silence that said everything. Outside, the storm had passed. But inside, something far more powerful had begun. Emma sat alone in the bathroom of her Springdale home, the silence louder than ever. The test lay face down on the sink, her hands trembling in her lap. The air was thick with anticipation, fear, and something else, something warm and sacred and terrifying all at once. 3 weeks had passed since that night, since the kiss that lingered in her skin, since the night that changed everything. She hadn't told Liam that her period was late. She didn't want to say the words until she was sure, until she could face the possibility herself. Her body had felt different, lately sensitive, almost like it was humming with a frequency she couldn't explain, but her heart wouldn't let her believe. Not yet. Now, she was 1 minute away from knowing. The timer buzzed. She reached for the test, her breath shallow. 2 lines. Positive. Emma let out a choked breath as her other hand flew to her mouth. The tears came instantly, not from panic, but from something much deeper. Relief, awe, joy, so big it cracked open her ribs. She was pregnant not from a sterile plan, not from a second medical attempt, but from love, from him, from that one night they had crossed the line between what was planned and what was destined. She sat on the floor, knees hugged to her chest, heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted to run all the way to Manhattan to him. Liam, the man who had always been her safe place, her anchor, and now the father of her child. But along with the joy came fear. What if this changed everything again? What if it made things harder, not easier? What if he thought it complicated their agreement? Or worse, what if he thought it was a mistake? She waited until evening, pacing for hours. The autumn wind knocked gently at her windows, as if urging her forward. She finally grabbed her coat, wrapped the test in a velvet pouch her grandmother had once given her, and drove through the night. When Liam opened the door of his penthouse, his face lit up in surprise and concern. "Emma, what's wrong?" She didn't speak. She stepped inside, handed him the pouch with shaking hands, and waited. He opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the object inside, and then freezing. He looked up. "Is this?" She nodded, lips pressed together, afraid to speak. 1,000 emotions passed through his face in seconds. Shock, disbelief, and then something bright, something unmistakable joy. He crossed the room in 2 strides and wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But she didn't want to breathe. She just wanted to stay there, in that moment. "You're pregnant?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Yes," she whispered. "Naturally. It just happened." Liam stepped back, cupping her face between his hands, his eyes searching hers with a tenderness that stole her breath. "This isn't just a miracle. This is ours." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I didn't plan to tell you like this," she said. "I was scared. I didn't know how you'd feel. I didn't even know how I felt at first. How do you feel now?" She swallowed hard. "Hopeful. Grateful. Scared out of my mind. But mostly, full." Liam's eyes shone as he took her hands in his. "I need to tell you something too." She blinked. "What?" He paused, took a breath, and then, quietly, clearly, said the words she never expected to hear so soon. "I'm in love with you, Emma." Her breath caught. "I think I have been for years," he continued, "but I didn't know it until that night, until I saw the way you looked at me when you let your walls down, until I held you and realized this wasn't about a child. This was about you. Us." She shook her head gently, overwhelmed. "I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I was just lost in the moment. But Liam, I love you too. I think I always have, even when you were just the boy on the bench." His forehead touched hers, their eyes closed, and for a moment, the world disappeared. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of promises, of dreams, of beginnings. Later that night, they sat curled on the couch, his hand resting gently on her lower belly. "Do you want to know something crazy?" he whispered. "What? I already love this baby." She smiled through tears. "Me too. And I love you," he added. "More than any plan. More than any dream. You are the dream." Emma didn't answer right away. She just leaned into him, listening to the steady beat of his heart, knowing it was the same one that had always somehow echoed in hers. They had started with an agreement, but now they had a life growing between them, a new chapter, a new heartbeat, and a love that no contract could ever define. The morning sickness was manageable, the fatigue expected, but nothing had prepared Emma for the quiet cruelty of whispers behind her back. It began subtly. Glances in the grocery store that lingered too long, parents at school pickup avoiding her gaze, a neighbor who used to bring her lemon bread now crossing the street when they saw her coming. Springdale was a small town. And small towns, for all their charm, carried something sharp beneath their surface. Judgment disguised as concern. The news had spread faster than Emma ever imagined. It wasn't hard to piece together. One day, she was a quiet second-grade teacher. The next, she was pregnant and seen stepping out of a black SUV with Liam Harper, the billionaire who flew in and out of town like a shadow. The town did what it always did with stories. It didn't understand it, filled the blanks. She probably planned it. He's too rich to be fooled. She must have trapped him. She always seemed like a good girl. Guess we were wrong. Emma tried to block it out, tried to focus on her students, on the tiny life growing inside her. But words have a way of finding cracks. And when a mother at the school board meeting asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. If it was appropriate for a teacher in her situation to keep working around children, the silence that followed was deafening. That night, she received an email from the school director requesting a private meeting. When she entered the office the next morning, the director's expression was unreadable. "We've received some calls from concerned parents," she said gently. "They're questioning your position." Emma satt stiffly. "Because I'm pregnant?" The director hesitated. "Because of how the situation appears. You've always been respected here, Emma." But this has stirred a reaction. Emma clenched her hands in her lap. "So what are you suggesting? A temporary leave, just until things calm down?" The words hit harder than she expected, not because she hadn't braced for them, but because in that moment it felt like everything she had worked for, very book, read to sleepy children, every tear dried, every lesson prepared with love was erased by a single assumption. She nodded, too numb to protest. Walking back to her car, the world felt dimmer. The golden leaves overhead seemed to fall more heavily. Her hands trembled as she clutched the steering wheel, not from fear, but from something older, shame. Later that day, she sat on the steps of her porch, knees hugged to her chest, staring at nothing. When Liam's car pulled into the driveway, she didn't move. He approached slowly, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" She handed him the letter from the school. He read it in silence, then looked up, jaw tight, eyes dark. "I'm going to fix this." "No," she said quickly. "Please don't make it worse." "Make it worse?" His voice rose. "They're pushing you out because you're carrying our child." "I know, but if you come charging in like a billionaire on a mission, they'll just say I used you to get attention. They'll think I can't stand on my own." Liam paused, then sat beside her. "You don't have to stand on your own, Emma. You have me." Her voice broke. "But they don't see us. They see a man with power and a girl who got lucky." He turned to her fully. "Do you think that's what this is?" She shook her head. "No. But I need to prove that not with press releases or lawyers, with time, with grace." Liam reached for her hand. "I hate seeing you hurt." "I know," she whispered, eyes brimming, "but I've walked through pain before. What I haven't walked through is being loved out loud." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Then let's do that. Let's love out loud, even if they stare, even if they judge. I'll hold your hand in every room. I'll show them what this really is." She nodded, not because the fear was gone, but because the love was louder. The next Sunday, they walked into her church together. The whispers were instant, but Liam held her hand the whole time. When the pastor asked if anyone had a testimony, Liam stood. He didn't make a speech. He simply said, "I've learned that the most important things in life aren't built in boardrooms. They're built in silence, in patience, in people who show up again and again. That's what love looks like. And I found it." Emma cried quietly the entire ride home. Later that night, curled beside him on the couch, her head on his chest, she whispered, "I don't care what they say anymore. I'm not going to shrink just because they can't understand us." He kissed her temple. "You were never meant to shrink. You were meant to shine." She placed his hand on her belly, where a soft flutter danced beneath the skin. "They're going to know the truth," she said. "What truth? That love isn't about appearances. It's about who stays, who sees, who chooses you, even when it's inconvenient." Liam smiled. "Then they're going to see everything." The headlines faded quickly, as they always do. Whispers gave way to new gossip. Springdale moved on, mostly. A few stares remained, a few comments murmured behind hands. But for the most part, people stopped talking, and Liam and Emma kept living. They didn't hide. They didn't defend. They just loved openly, honestly, unapologetically. When Emma returned to the classroom weeks later, she walked in with her head high and her belly just beginning to round beneath a soft pink sweater. Her students ran to her, arms flung wide, eyes sparkling with excitement. There were questions, of course, mostly from little mouths asking if the baby would like dinosaurs or why she cried at a picture of a cat, but there was no judgment in their eyes, only wonder. That afternoon, as she sat cross-legged on the floor, helping a boy write his name, she felt a light tap on her shoulder. It was her colleague, Mrs. Clara, a woman known more for discipline than warmth. She held out a small paper bag. Inside was a soft, knitted baby hat, pale yellow, hand-stitched. "Just thought you might need it," she said awkwardly. Emma's throat tightened. "Thank you." Mrs. Clara nodded. "Don't let them make you smaller, dear. You're doing just fine." It was a quiet victory, but it felt enormous. Across town, Liam faced a different kind of scrutiny. Board members raised eyebrows when he started pushing meetings back to attend doctor appointments. Journalists speculated when he was seen walking hand in hand with Emma through the park. Some investors even hinted, politely, that he should be more careful with his image. Liam didn't flinch. He answered every question with clarity. "She's the woman I love. We're expecting a child. That's not a scandal. That's a blessing." And when one particularly smug interviewer asked him on live television if he regretted stepping away from work during such a critical time, Liam only smiled. "I've built companies," he said, "but now I'm building a family, and believe me, that's far more critical." The internet exploded. Suddenly, people weren't whispering about Emma anymore. They were watching, admiring, rooting. The once divided opinions shifted. The teacher who stood her ground, the billionaire who prioritized love over headlines, they became something of a quiet revolution. But none of that mattered to Emma. What mattered was how Liam looked at her across the kitchen counter while she poured orange juice in the mornings. What mattered was the way he pressed his hand to her belly and whispered stories to their unborn child. What mattered was how, even on the days she felt bloated, moody, or scared, he made her feel like the most beautiful woman alive. They started planning their life in the way people do when love stops being an idea and starts being a home. Liam surprised her one weekend by taking her to Greenwood Estates, a quiet, elegant neighborhood just outside the city. He stopped in front of a cream-colored house with blue shutters and a wide porch. "It's ours," he said. Emma blinked. "You bought a house?" He smiled nervously. "I know we didn't talk about it. I just wanted you to have a place that felt like yours. Like ours, somewhere quiet. Somewhere we could raise him." "Him?" he grinned. The blood test came back. "It's a boy." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I didn't mean to make the decision without you," he added quickly. "If you hate it, I can sell it." But she shook her head, eyes locked on the house. "It's perfect." They walked through the empty rooms together, hand in hand. The echo of their steps felt like a promise. In the future nursery, Emma stood by the window, sunlight casting a golden glow on her face. "We should name him," she said softly. Liam came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What do you have in mind?" "Ethan," she said after a pause. "Ethan Rivera Harper. Rivera was my mother's maiden name." Liam closed his eyes. "Ethan Rivera Harper. I love it." They stood in silence, soaking in the moment. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Liam took her hand and led her to the rooftop. The city sparkled around them, a constellation of light and life. He dropped to one knee. Emma gasped. "I know we started this as something else," he said. "As a plan. As an agreement. But what we've built this is love. It's real, and I don't want to wait another day to call you mine." He opened the velvet box. "I'm not asking you because of the baby. I'm asking you because of you. Will you marry me?" Emma, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispered, "Yes. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he stood and kissed her, there were no reporters, no critics, no whispers, only two hearts choosing each other again and again, and one tiny heartbeat growing stronger with every day. Moving into the new house felt like stepping into a new chapter of their lives, one written with slower mornings, deeper laughter, and the quiet sound of belonging. The cream-colored walls were still bare, the hardwood floors freshly polished, but it already felt like home, not because of the furniture or the layout, but because they were there together. Emma stood barefoot in the kitchen, folding tiny onesies fresh out of the dryer. The sun poured through the tall windows, casting warm stripes across the wooden countertop. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon, baby powder, and new beginnings. Liam appeared behind her, carrying a box labeled Ethan's Books. "I just realized," he said, placing the box down gently. "Our son is going to grow up with bedtime stories every night. And most of them are going to be read by the woman who reads better than anyone I've ever met." She turned to him, smiling. "Only if you promise to do all the silly voices." Liam grinned. "Deal." They had spent the last 2 weeks painting the nursery soft blue with little clouds along the ceiling. It had been Liam's idea, but he let Emma choose the crib, the rug, the curtains. She had cried when the glider arrived, not because it was perfect, but because she could already imagine herself holding their son in it, singing lullabies. Everything was starting to feel real now, and fast. Emma was just over 6 months pregnant, her belly round and firm beneath flowy dresses. She had started feeling Ethan's kicks first fluttery, like bubbles rising through water, then stronger, more insistent. Each one brought a new rush of wonder and emotion. Liam would drop everything every time, just to kneel and place his ear against her belly. "Say hi to Daddy," he'd whisper. They were building something lasting, not just a house, but a rhythm, a way of living that honored both their pasts and their dreams. Emma continued teaching part-time, but now from home. Liam surprised her by converting one of the bedrooms into a bright, book-filled study with a vintage chalkboard and a reading nook. "For your soul," he said, "and for the stories you'll write one day." In the evenings, they cooked together, Liam chopping vegetables while Emma stirred sauces, her bare feet dancing to jazz in the background. They talked about baby names, parenting fears, and whether they should get a dog. They had disagreements, of course, about curtains, about what color the stroller should be. But they always ended with laughter or a soft kiss in the hallway. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the garage, Emma found a faded shoebox tied with a red ribbon. Inside were photoshundreds of them notes, drawings, a ticket stub from their first movie night at 13, a napkin with Liam plus Emma equals trouble scribbled in blue ink. Her heart swelled. "You kept all this?" she asked, showing it to him later. He nodded quietly. "Even when I was building empires, this was the only thing that felt like proof I was really living." A few days later, they received a call from the doctor with news that confirmed what the blood test had hinted weeks before. Ethan was healthy, strong heartbeat, perfect development, no complications. They cried in each other's arms that night, relieved, overwhelmed, humbled. Then came the night of the garden dinner. Liam had set up a table beneath the fairy lights that lined their backyard fence. The sky was streaked with orange and lavender. Emma wore a long white dress, her curls pinned loosely, her hands instinctively cradling her belly. Liam lit candles and poured sparkling cider into crystal glasses. "To the life we're building," he said, raising his glass. She touched hers to his. "To the boy who's already teaching us what love really means." After dinner, as they danced barefoot under the stars, Emma rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I still can't believe this is my life." Liam kissed her hair. "It's our life. And we've only just begun." A week later, they chose to make it official. The wedding was intimate, just 20 guests, held in the tiny white church Emma had attended since childhood. Her former pastor officiated, his voice warm and steady as he spoke of love, rooted in friendship, watered by trust, and blossomed into family. Emma walked down the aisle barefoot, her dress flowing softly around her as she held a bouquet of wildflowers, her belly swaying gently with every step. Liam couldn't take his eyes off her. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You've never looked more like forever." They exchanged vows, written by hand-draw, poetic, vulnerable, and, when the ceremony ended, their kiss tasted like sunlight and certainty. In the quiet of their first night as husband and wife, Emma curled into him, whispering, "We started with an agreement, and somehow ended up here." Liam smiled against her skin. Maybe this was the plan all along. We just didn't know it. Outside their window, wind moved gently through the trees, and inside, a home stood steady, ready, waiting for the life they were about to bring into it. The days following the wedding passed in a golden blur. Quiet mornings filled with laughter, slow dinners by candlelight, and whispered dreams shared beneath warm blankets. Emma was glowing not just from the pregnancy, but from something deeper. A calmness. A joy that ran steady and low, like a river beneath everything. She was 32 weeks along now, her belly full, her steps slower. Liam insisted on helping with everything. He massaged her swollen ankles at night, read every article he could find about labor and delivery, and kept a go-bag packed in the hallway closet, just in case. One morning, as they sat on the front porch sipping decaf and watching squirrels dart through the garden, Emma rested her hand on her belly and smiled. "He kicked again," she said. Liam dropped his cup and rushed over, pressing both hands gently against her bump. "Ethan, are you trying to break furniture already?" he whispered. They laughed, and Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes fluttering closed. Those were the moments they held on to, the quiet ones. But life had a way of moving faster than expected. 2 weeks later, just after midnight, Emma woke with a sharp pain low in her back. At first, she thought it was one of the usual cramps, but when the second wave hit stronger, deeper, she gasped aloud. Liam was up in seconds. "Emma?" She gripped the edge of the headboard, breathing through it. "I think it's time." The hospital bag was already by the door. Liam called the doctor while helping her into her dress, his voice surprisingly calm, though his eyes said otherwise. "Everything's going to be okay," he repeated, kissing her forehead as they drove. "We're going to meet our son today." The hospital lights were too bright, the air too sterile. Emma hated the beeping machines, the way time stretched and then collapsed all at once. Hours passed. The contractions grew closer, stronger. Her fingers crushed Liam's hand with each wave of pain. At one point, tears slid silently down her cheeks. "I don't know if I can do this." Liam knelt beside her, eyes glassy. "You've done harder things. You've loved me when I was unlovable. You've walked through fire without blinking. You can do this." She believed him. At 3:47 a.m., after 17 grueling hours, a cry pierced the sterile quiet of the delivery room. "Ethan!" The nurse placed him on her chest, warm, wrinkled, impossibly tiny, his little lungs working so hard to announce himself to the world. Emma sobbed, her arms cradling him like she'd waited her whole life for this moment. Liam stood frozen for a moment, one hand over his mouth, then he stepped forward, slowly, almost reverently, their son. Their miracle. Emma looked up at him. "Do you want to hold him?" Liam nodded, speechless, and reached out. When the baby settled into his arms, Liam broke. He sat in the corner of the room, his head bent, his tears falling freely. "You're here," he whispered. "You're really here." He rocked Ethan gently, his voice a low hum against the baby's tiny ear. Later, as the sun began to rise and the city stirred to life outside, Emma rested in her hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. Liam sat beside her, Ethan asleep in his arms, his tiny fingers curled around his father's thumb. "I didn't know it was possible," Liam said quietly. "What?" "To love like this, all at once." Emma smiled. "Now you understand?" He looked at her. "Understand what? That this family, love, creation, it's not something you plan. It's something you live, one heartbeat at a time." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. Then her lips. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saying yes, for choosing me." "I didn't just choose you," she said. "I always chose you, even before I knew it." Ethan stirred between them, a soft whimper escaping his lips. Emma cradled him again, her heart so full it ached. And in that room, filled with soft light and 3 steady heartbeats, they became something unshakable, a family. 6 months had passed since Ethan's birth, and the world no longer looked the same. The quiet streets of Greenwood Estates were now filled with baby laughter, early morning stroller walks, and late-night lullabies hummed from a nursery window. Their home no longer echoed. It breathed, it pulsed with life, with routine, with love that unfolded in small, sacred moments. Emma had returned to teaching part-time, just 2 mornings a week, and though she missed her students, she had found something equally powerful in her days with Ethan. She read to him while he napped on her chest, sang while folding laundry, whispered stories about the world while rocking him to sleep. Everything she once gave to the classroom now poured gently into the rhythm of their home. Liam, once a man always tethered to his phone, had changed too. He learned how to change diapers like a pro, warmed bottles with one hand while typing emails with the other, and rarely took a meeting that couldn't wait until Ethan's nap. His proudest moment wasn't landing another investment. It was being there the first time his son reached for him and said, "Da." Some nights, long after Ethan had fallen asleep, they would sit on the back porch in silence, just holding hands, just breathing. "I didn't think life could feel this quiet," Liam whispered once, staring at the stars. Emma smiled. "It's not quiet. It's full." And it was full of diaper bags and pacifiers, full of endless to-do lists and forgotten laundry cycles, full of texts like, "Can you pick up more formula?" And he just smiled again. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the newness of parenting, there was something unshakable: peace. Their story had started with a proposal, a logical, sterile arrangement between two best friends, but love had its own timeline. It grew in the pauses, in the late-night talks, in the way Liam looked at her when she sang off-key to Ethan, in the way Emma clutched his hand during every pediatric appointment, in the way they fought and forgave and stayed. The world still had its opinions. Some people still questioned their beginning. Others speculated in tabloids, called it the billionaire fairy tale. But those voices grew quieter, because their love didn't need defense. It was visible in the way they moved around each other instinctively, attentively in the way their son lit up when both their faces appeared above his crib in the morning. It was visible in the way they chose each other every day. One afternoon, while reorganizing old files in the office, Emma found the letter she had written Liam before they started it all, the one she had given him the day she said yes to the idea of having his child. She sat down and reread her own words, smiling through tears. It no longer felt like the start of something transactional. It felt like the first page of the greatest love story she could have imagined. Later, when she handed it to Liam, he read it slowly, quietly, then folded it with care and tucked it inside a leather-bound journal filled with baby milestones and photos. "Do you ever think," he asked, "what might have happened if you'd said no?" She looked at him, heart swelling. "I think I would have always wondered, always felt like something sacred had slipped through my hands." He pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on her head. "And now? Now I know," she whispered. "Everything that was meant for me was already waiting. I just had to be brave enough to say yes." In the nursery, Ethan stirred, cooing softly in his sleep, and in the quiet that followed, Emma realized something. This love they had built it wasn't made of grand declarations or perfect plans. It had been shaped by patience, forged in friendship, and sealed by the most unexpected miracle of all. Family, not one they were born into, but one they had chosen, one they had created together. In the end, it wasn't the plan that mattered, and not the contract, not the timing, not even the promise of a perfect family. It was the choice, quiet, courageous, and unconditional. Two friends, one child, a love born not from fantasy, but from truth. Because sometimes, the greatest kind of love isn't found in someone new. It's been beside you all along, waiting for you to see it. And would you have the courage to say yes to a love that doesn't fit the rules, but fits your soul?